Okay, let's take one more look at this website we're working on. And this time I want to focus on just a couple quick things we can do to make the content a little bit easier to read. So, um, one of the things that I see on this page, right? I'm viewing it full screen on my computer, and this is just some filler text down here. But reading the content on this page is a little bit like watching a tennis match, right? So by the time your eyes have to track from one side of the monitor all the way over to the other, and that's a little bit difficult. And then when you get to the end of the line, you have to somehow get back to the right place in the paragraph, and that if you have long paragraphs and lots of text, that could be a little bit difficult. So I would like to limit the width of the content on my page, even if I have the browser open full screen. And if you think about that, that makes sense because anytime you read magazines and newspapers, they put the text in columns. And I would say you could open up any novel you have or textbook you have, and I bet you wouldn't see more than maybe a dozen or so words on a line before they go down to the next words before they go down to the next line. So I'm going to go back to the CSS now, and I'm going to go to the body first, and I'm going to add another HTML element in here. And I'll talk more specifically about classes are in a later video, but I'm going to make a div and a class called container, and I'm just going to take all of the HTML content, and I'm tabbing it over so you can see how it's inside this container. So the container element begins here and ends here, and div is just a division of the page. So it's a box that we can now write CSS for, and the box holds all of this content. Okay, and the syntax for that, since it's a class, since I have a class, what I do is I go down to the end and I do div dot container, and I'm going to kind of follow like I did with the image. I am going to give it a max width, and I'm just going to pick 700 pixels here. Right, there is no right number for that. I think you just need to pick a number until you look at the page and it feels like it's right, or it feels like it's easy to read. And I'll refresh, and now these paragraphs definitely look a lot easier to read because I think there's a reasonable number of words, and my eyes don't have to track too far back to pick up on the next line. Right. One of the things I don't like now is I have all this extra space over here, and that's kind of ugly. So I'm going to go back to my container, and I'm going to put a left margin of auto, and I'll do the same thing for the right margin of auto. And so what the browser is going to do now is it's going to look at all of this extra space here, and since I set the margins to auto on both sides, it will just divide them up evenly and put them on both sides of the page. And now we have, a nice centered document. And this is, and so what's happening now with that max width is if I shrink it down, right, it's a max width, so the text will always wrap to the size of the container and the image is shrinking. And as it gets larger, this container around here is going to stay at 700 pixels. And the content is always nice and easy to read. And one more little tip for dealing with mobile devices, and that is, I think these lines of text are a little bit bunched up together. So I think it's a good idea on your paragraphs at minimum to add some line height in here. And I'm just going to pick 1.6. Again, there is no right number here either. But when we view the page with the line height, you'll see it just made each line take up 1.5 or 1.6 times the font size. So 1.6 times 18 pixels, and it puts a little bit of space in between. And especially for a longer paragraph like this one, I think it's definitely going to be a little bit more comfortable to read as your eyes track from one end and have to pick up on the next line. And I think it just looks a little bit nicer too. So what does the number mean? 1.0 would be single spaced like it was. If you did 2.0, it'd be double spaced. I don't know. I feel like that's a little too much. Looks sort of like a term paper and not like something that you want to read. And again, just play with that line, play with that number until the content looks right to you. All right. So that's just two quick tips for enhancing the readability of your websites.